Now, the news for South Mississippi. WLOX News This Week.
Hi, thanks for joining us. I'm Dave Elliott.
And I'm Doug Walker. Welcome to WLOX News This Week.
Coming up on the show this weekend, the Mississippi Gulf Resort Classic is teeing up for another round in South Mississippi. And weather again causing chaos with air travel around America and here on the coast. That's coming up a little bit later. But we begin with the latest from the state capitol, where lawmakers are debating teacher pay raises as well as tackling the state budget. Here to talk about that and other issues concerning South Mississippi, State Representative David Baria. Representative Baria, always a pleasure having you here on the show. We'll get into some of the specific issues in a moment, but I just want to start in very general terms. Knowing the dynamic as I do up there in Jackson and following you on Twitter with your tweets and your posts on Facebook, it sounds to me that from a Democrat point of view, you guys are getting mauled up there.
Well, I wouldn't say that necessarily, Dave. I mean, you know as well as everybody else who follows the legislature that we don't have the numbers without some help from across the aisle to get anything passed. However, on revenue bills, which require a 3/5 vote, we are able to defeat bad legislation, and we've done that several times because we're sticking together as a caucus on those issues that we think are detrimental to citizens of the state. But you're right on majority votes. The Republican leadership doesn't even have to reach out and discuss anything with us. They just bring it to the floor and run over us if that's what they want to do.
Is that frustrating for you? Because, I mean, for years, obviously, the Democrats ruled the roost, and now the shoe's on the other foot. So is that disconcerting for you? Does it frustrate you not having your voice heard as much as you might like?
Well, it's frustrating in that I think most people, myself included, really believe that the process ought to be about reaching across the aisle and working with the party opposite to try to achieve the best possible result for everybody in Mississippi. And you really don't get the best ideas becoming law unless you have some back and forth. And when you don't listen to opposing points of view and you just bring your idea out as a bill out of committee and then just roll it through the process because you have the numbers, then you, in my opinion, you don't get the best result. And that's the problem. And so, yeah, it is frustrating from that perspective.
Let's jump into the teacher pay raise issue. $4,200 over 4 years with some kind of, I find, to be unusual automatic mandates that have been put on teachers. Democrats wanted much more, flew through the House easily, in the Senate being debated. How frustrating was that? What did the Democrats want? You wanted a just straight across the board $5,000 raise?
Yeah, let's keep in mind, Dave, it's been probably 7 or 8 years since teachers have gotten a significant across-the-board raise. And so what we voted on in the House last year, Republicans and Democrats supported a $5,000 across-the-board pay raise, and it was killed in the Senate. So this year, we were for the same thing. However, the Republicans decided on a different plan, and they stuck together, and so they were able to pass their plan. Now, the problem with their plan is that it is a 4-year phase-in. It's back-end loaded so that the primary amount of the raise comes in year 3 and 4, and it's tied to economic growth targets, which we may or may not reach. So it's somewhat illusory. I mean, if in year 4 we don't hit 3% growth, then teachers don't get a raise.
But Speaker Gunn said, David, let me just jump in. Speaker Gunn said that he basically had to do that deal because the governor, who was pushing for merit pay, would not have, if he didn't throw in some of these strange little mechanisms, that it wouldn't have gone anywhere with the governor.
Well, this is the first time since I have been following the legislature that the House of Representatives takes action or doesn't take action based on what we think the Senate might do or what the governor might do. In the past, the House and the Senate alike have always had their own personalities, and we did what we felt as a body was the right thing to do. And then if the other side didn't agree, that's what conference committees were for, and you negotiate out the differences. Now what we're doing is we're just caving in to what the Senate says it might pass or what the governor says he wants. And I don't think that's the strongest bargaining position, and I think that if we're going to be for teacher pay raises, we go in with the strongest bargaining position we can. And for me, that was a $5,000 across-the-board pay raise.
On the topic of merit pay, that split almost along party lines. But what is wrong with the concept of merit pay for teachers. I mean, merit pay is used in just about every other industry in this country. If you do a good job, you get paid more. If you don't do a good job, you get paid less or lose your job. What's wrong with the concept of merit pay?
Well, as a concept, I guess there's nothing wrong with it, but the problem is in how you define doing a good job. If you're making widgets and if you have quotas to meet and you got to make a good widget and you got to make 1,000 of them and you meet those quotas, then that's performance. That's good performance. But in terms of teaching children who come from diverse backgrounds, who for some don't get a hot meal except for that meal they get at lunch at school, whose parents may not be doing the right things in terms of supporting them and their education and their homework, then how do you judge a teacher whose product is a well-educated student? So that's the problem that I have and lots of folks have with merit-based pay for teachers.
Representative Baria, I want to move on to Medicaid right now because that was kind of like DOA, dead on arrival in the legislature this year. But there was still a big push for it. And again, it was voted on in the House and failed almost on party lines, most every Republican voting against it, most every Democrat voting for it. Your stance on Medicaid, is it totally dead this session or does it have a chance of coming back up?
Well, it has a chance of coming back up, but I do feel like it's probably on life support. Our governor and our Republican leadership have said flatly that they're just not for it. But what is happening, and this is evolving, is hospitals are losing money because DSH payments are going away. That's Medicaid and Medicare DSH. Medicaid DSH is not quite as significant. It's probably 4 or 5 million, but Medicare DSH is huge. It's a number that's closer to 200 million. And you see around the state hospitals just this week, Southwest Regional laid off 5 doctors, and they did that so they didn't have to lay off 150 other positions. And they're renegotiating every contract. Hancock County's had trouble. Atala County has asked for permission to go to their board of supervisors and borrow money. Natchez Hospital, we just approved this week that they could go into bankruptcy. Tupelo's laid off. The hospital up in Prentiss County is threatening to shut down. Hospitals are suffering, and if we don't figure out a way to help them because of what Obamacare has done to their budgets, then we ought to be ashamed of ourselves.
We have not a lot of time, but I want to say a little bit more of that Medicaid expansion. The governor has told me on at least 3 occasions on the subject of Medicaid expansion, because I've asked him pointed questions on it. He basically doesn't trust the Fed. I know in the first year it's like almost 100% federal to state money, then it goes to 90%, and then down the road the governor fears that the Fed will leave Mississippi holding the bag once all is said and done. You must have more faith in the federal government than the governor does.
Well, I guess I do, but let me tell you, the governor has plenty of faith in the federal government when it comes to other budgets. We approved probably 50 special fund budgets just this week, and there was a significant number of those budgets that also rely on federal dollars. Well, when we asked the question, why are we depending on the federal government on these budgets, nobody could answer that question.
Well, Representative Baria,
that's an artificial reactionary response because he just doesn't want to do it and he can't come up with a really good reason.
Well, let me jump in there and say, here to me is the simple answer. If the feds renege on their promise to pay up to 90% for the next several years, then the state just dumps out of the program saying, you broke your end of the bargain, we're out. Can't we just do that?
Absolutely we can, and we've talked about that, but, as I said, it's an artificial basis for refusing to expand the program, and the governor knows that, and we rely on federal funds for MDOT and for, there are 10 or 15 different budgets where we approved this week, and we rely on federal money, and nobody said, well, we're afraid they're not going to come through on these other budgets.
Yeah, well, it's obvious that this is Governor Bryant's. This just reflects his general opposition to just about everything President Obama wants to do, I think.
That is exactly right.
Representative David Baria, we appreciate it so much. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, guys. Anytime.